There's an old saying in marketing, sex sells. Whether it's steamy scenes or just a hint of attraction, romance has always been the easiest way to manufacture excitement for a new show or film to audiences. For decades, the PR relationships, the Hollywood showmance, has been an effective way to sell a film, and audiences honestly have lapped it up. Two actors looking loved up on a red carpet blurred the lines between fiction and reality, turning casual moviegoers into obsessed detectives. And now, especially in the age of social media, every look, little laugh or shoulder graze could mean something between actors. Or could it just be a heavily manufactured tool to try and get audiences to see if the chemistry on screen is as good as the chemistry that they're seeing off screen? But social media is a double-edged sword. Today, more people than ever understand the marketing playbook. There is more of a public understanding that talk show chats are heavily mapped out, press tours are overly manufactured, and exactly what it means when an actor has been media trained. Now that so many of us can see the puppet strings, that strategy is hitting a wall. With the rollout of the new Wuthering Heights, where a married Margot Robbie and a single, Jacob Elordi are acting extremely cozy and, as she described it, codependent, audiences are finally calling BS on showmances.
Her saying that their souls are connected. No matter where they are, who they're with, their souls are connected. Him picking me up with one arm just made me so weak in the knees. Y'all cannot be serious. You can't be serious that you genuinely believe that that is how she feels. You cannot be this thick to think that that is not just press. Like, that is not just her trying to get into the headlines.
Hi, I'm Kayla, and I talk about period dramas, history, and historical fiction here on the channel. And if you are looking for a more thorough chat around the Wuthering Heights casting and main themes, race, Emily Bronte, etc., then I have a playlist of a few videos that I have done on those subjects. This is not about that. This is strictly about the history and current state of the showmance and how it's not working with the new Wuthering Heights. So if you want more of a discussion on those topics, then check out that playlist. So let's talk about the history of the Hollywood showmance, how it started, why it's worked on us for so long, and why we are finally getting the ick. The showmance really began to develop during the golden age of Hollywood and the tabloid era, where the emergence of film started to create global superstars who were not just interesting because of their talents, but whatever was happening with their private lives. Studios soon cottoned on that, for the most part, scandals weren't something that would tank films, but quite the opposite, and they soon leaned into figuring out ways of making actors' lives off the camera turn into ticket sales. In the golden age of Hollywood, so roughly, the 1920s to the 1950s, studios like MGM and Paramount locked stars into restrictive long-term contracts. I think of around 7 years that included strict morality clauses, which dictated the way that they could conduct themselves. These gave executives total legal control over an actor's public image, meaning they could dictate who you were seen with, who you dated, and possibly even who you married in extreme circumstances. This was a way for studios to step in and course correct the script of actors' personal lives if their real life wasn't matching up to the fantasy that they were selling on screen. In several cases, this illusion ended up destroying the real lives of beloved actors. Judy Garland always comes to mind for me. I'm a big Wizard of Oz fan. I've loved Judy Garland since I was a child, and to hear what happened in her personal life is just, When she became pregnant at 19, the studio feared that a mother could no longer be sold to audiences as the innocent girl next door. To protect that lucrative image, the studio and her family orchestrated the termination of a pregnancy, prioritizing the preservation of her on-screen persona over her personal life. Rock Hudson is another example. Throughout the 1950s, Hudson was the industry's Hollywood heartthrob, but behind the scenes, rumors regarding his sexuality were beginning to threaten his career. To kill the story before it could destroy his box office appeal, his agent, Henry Wilson, orchestrated an entire wedding. He arranged for Rock Hudson to marry his own secretary, Phyllis Gates, in a sudden ceremony that was immediately splashed across every magazine cover. It was a perfectly executed PR move that silenced the tabloid rumors. To the public, it came across across as a whirlwind romance, but the real story was that it was a strategic business transaction designed to protect the asset. Audiences ate up these juicy stories because the information ecosystem was just a closed loop. There was no TMZ or TikTok or blind items, leaked recordings to Twitter of film sets, or, male stars inappropriately messaging models on Instagram, et cetera, that you end up hearing about because DMs are so messy. Columnists like Hedda Hopper were fed stories directly by the studios and could then decide who to write about favorably or enforce the Hollywood blacklist. If a studio needed to promote a new heartthrob, they would arrange a date with a rising ingenue, tip off a photographer, and have it on the cover of a magazine the next week. And then the buzz would just be let out of the gates. It was this genius controlled illusion to average everyday families, and it was designed to make them believe the chemistry that you saw in the cinema would follow these actors home. I'd love to say this thing died out with the old Hollywood system, but as so many of us have witnessed through our lifetimes, the mechanics have just change shape over and over again. Fast forward to the 1990s and early 2000s, and you had child stars like Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears, or the cast of the Mickey Mouse Club, whose entire adolescence was packaged into consumable, sometimes romantic narratives as they became teens. Their breakups were turned into marketing campaigns for albums rather than just like messy, immature teenage heartbreaks that we all had. I could go on and on about the long-term control of stars and their personal lives through PR and clever marketing, but the short-term, very blatant, like full-on showmance to market a specific film, I feel like you can really see that blueprint emerge when Elvis started making movies. For each of his films, which most were some sort of rom-com musical in one way or another, there was tabloid rumors of a fling, a potential sighting, a kind of studio leak that then made audiences more interested in seeing their on-screen chemistry. Actresses who starred alongside him in films such as Anne Margaret and Shelley Fabre and many more were then splashed across headlines with him in magazines just in time for audiences to hit the theaters. From there, the paparazzi machine became more and more intense when it came to on-screen couples. Eventually, the potential romances of franchise actors like those from Twilight became a billion-dollar industry. It fueled an obsession that kept that franchise alive for several films. For the Spider-Man curse, Tobey Maguire and Kristen Dunst dated. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone dated. Tom Holland and Zendaya dated. At a certain point, it stopped feeling like a coincidence and started feeling like a job requirement for the role. Whether or not these romances were ever 100% real, 100% fake, or somewhere messily in between, it didn't matter. It taught every studio in town that if you can get the fans to ship the actors, they will defend the movie with their lives. In the golden age, PR relationships were more about hiding secrets to protect the asset. In the modern era, it kind of flipped. It became about monetizing however much chemistry two people might have to sell the product. I don't exactly know when the couples themselves became happy to kind of be in on it in such a blatant way for the sake of really raking it in, but they did, and now it's become way too over the top in a way that we can really tell as an audience. Now, Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi are currently on a press tour for Wuthering Heights, and whatever this Showmance is, it is not hitting like it used to. Like, I'm kind of getting secondhand embarrassment. After Robbie said she was codependent on Elordi during filming, that he filled her dressing room with bundles of flowers on Valentine's Day, and the two of them getting matching rings with the famous line from Wuthering Heights, "Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same," which, to be honest, the rings are kind of pretty. But Jacob Elordi said during the press tour, "We have a mutual obsession. If you have the opportunity to share a film set with Margot Robbie, you're going to make sure you're within 5 to 10 meters at all times," which just comes across a bit like obsessive and manufactured, especially him coming off the press tour for Frankenstein, where everything felt a lot more about the film and the story and intellectual in the marketing. It used to be that when a couple were having fiery chemistry on the press tour, that headlines would be all about their rumored romance. But I'm seeing how, at least on like Instagram and TikTok, how it's more about how cringy they are. And general audiences speculating this move is more of an outward tactic to sell a film where the chemistry isn't actually there on screen to get butts in the seats rather than anything truly real between the two of them.
I have been pretty significantly turned off by the press surrounding their off-screen relations, like whatever's going on with that.
Oh, how like they became emotionally codependent or whatever.
So like there has been like this progression of like every movie that has a male and female lead, and actually any leads. The movie seems to be dependent on the press around these two maybe having a romantic relationship off-screen, even though like one's married and one's dating, and like will they, won't they? And it's like very, very weird, and like no one's buying this one for some reason, and I don't know, maybe because it just like feels inauthentic.
I think that's just how it goes. Like now, I think that's how they sell movies.
But like this is an adaptation of a classic. I think people have been curious enough as it is. You don't have to like
Sex sells.
do this much. It's just disappointing to me to look at these two A-list celebrities buy into the like, sorry, like anyone but you press tour.
I feel like the trust has been broken with audiences recently with this kind of thing. I'm thinking specifically of the anyone but you effect, where Sydney Sweeney and Glen Powell manufactured an alleged affair to sell not the greatest rom-com ever. We have been in a rom-com drought for years at this point. For whatever reason, some of the amazingly written rom-coms of the 90s and 2000s are just gone, and they cannot seem to replicate them for modern stories. I get infuriated by this subject because I believe that in part rom-coms are looked down upon. They're not taken as seriously, and so studios think they can be lazily made with terrible storytelling and subpar acting because primarily women will just lap them up as long as there is a happy ending by the rolling credits. When in reality, most of us can tell how badly they're written, that there's little chemistry between most of these couples, and how little budget, these like Netflixified rom-coms have, that we don't expect much, if anything, from rom-coms anymore. It's infuriating when the reality is comedy is hard to write. Romance is even harder to be manufactured, and it sends a very specific message, especially to women, when the only times these tactics are really employed in PR and marketing for film and television is when it's romance-adjacent media, which to me signals that other types of storytelling, historical fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, etc., can be seen as more serious media, where the questions and answers can be far more focused on the actual story on screen than whether two people are staring and winking at each other across a red carpet. Anywho, I think the film that broke the Showmance system was Anyone But You. When the film was released in 2023, the box office numbers for rom-coms were dying. When it came out that Sydney Sweeney and Glen Powell were filming a rom-com in Australia, it followed with a number of suggestive photos hinting at the fact that the two, who were both in long-term relationships, I think one was engaged, I don't remember which one, that they were having an affair while they were filming. Media went abuzz about him hanging out with her family. The two of them spending time alone together, rumors swirled that I think like his girlfriend wasn't allowed to go visit him in Australia or something, and it really put out to the public the fact that these two were making a big box office romance. By the time the film came out, some people believed they were together and were going to the film to just see if their chemistry was as palpable as people had seen it whilst they were filming in Australia. The crazy thing to me is them admitting it. Like, I would just never say anything about this because it does break the entire system. People can see it happening so blatantly now, and they can be like, well, this is just another Anyone But You film over and over again. In a New York Times interview after the movie crossed $200 million, they explicitly revealed that it was all a performance. Glen Powell just came out and said, "The two things that you have to sell a rom-com are fun and chemistry. Sydney and I have a lot of fun together, and we have a ton of effortless chemistry. That's people wanting what's on the screen off the screen. And sometimes you just have to lean into it a bit." They treated the press tour like an extension of the script. It was a financial masterclass that kind of revived the theatrical rom-com for this tiny little blip. But it came at a very real cost, I think. Glen Powell's real-life girlfriend, Gigi Paris, went on a podcast not too long ago and talked about how she wasn't comfortable being a part of something so fake just so he could sell a movie. She ended their relationship in the middle of the press tour and, famously unfollowed both of them. And I think she posted something like "Know Your Worth" on Instagram, and then 1 or 2 years after the film had already been out, she admitted to the fact that it was all this big campaign that he wanted her to be okay with. But essentially, she was collateral damage in a marketing campaign. To me, Hollywood took the wrong lesson from this success. Executives didn't think, wow, Sydney and Glen have this once-in-a-generation charisma. This is like the new Richard Gere and Julia Roberts all over again. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean, please. They thought, oh, so if we force our actors to fake an affair, we get a $200 million hit. And who cares if we reveal it all afterwards, because we've already made our money. Studios are trying to copy-paste the anyone but you formula onto actors like Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi. But with social media, the digital footprint is forever, and the general public can see through these clumsy, aggressive attempts now simply because it worked for a couple other romances. We forgave this really overt example because it felt fun. I think there was no real harm in it. But now it feels like we're being scammed and handled by the media and treated like we're dumb. The messiest example of trying to copy and paste this Showmance formula was season 3 of Bridgerton with Nicola Coughlan and Luke Newton. And I remember it like it was yesterday because it was a mess. And I think some of us were traumatized. They did a live trailer reveal of season 3 on YouTube with Nicola and Luke, and they were sitting pretty much on top of each other. And that set the tone for the rest of the world tour, as they called the promotional season of the show, which might have been the biggest, most over-the-top, promo stint of a tour I've ever seen. And if you did not live through this, count yourself lucky, because the secondhand embarrassment I feel as a learned, well-educated woman with a PhD to fall for this mess is the worst embarrassing feeling I have felt in a long time. So to promote season 3, Nicola and Luke were sent on a world tour to places like, I think, Sydney or Bowral in Australia, London, New York, Verona, Rio de Janeiro. And in every location, there was a photo shoot. There was some version of hand-holding for cameras. There was interviews that were really suggestive. They were wiping each other's faces while eating food, brushing each other's hair and doing prom poses, very, very coupley poses that went beyond, promoting a project as co-stars. I think there was this silent consensus that because the two of them weren't publicly with anyone, and they were young and beautiful and seemingly had this special bond between each other, that this was a good opportunity to push, these two people are falling in love to the absolute max whilst they are promoting Bridgerton. There was almost daily stuff coming out where people were like, they're holding hands here, they've got their fingers interlocked, which only couples do. He's being asked what he thought of her in a wedding gown. They'd say things like, you're the only person I have this type of special relationship with. Interviewers asked explicit, suggestive questions about practicing the carriage scene at home or breaking furniture, and the pair leaned right into talking about how they enjoyed filming those scenes, that they, had to be told to stop when they were making out because they just kept going. They filmed Bridgerton merchandise videos that were very suggestive, in my opinion. They were sent to Verona, to the fictional place of Juliet's balcony from Romeo and Juliet, where a bunch of couples either got engaged or renewed their vows in front of them. It was just really, really full on. It was a lot. And then they took romantic prom photos from the balcony. I don't know. I've let it go now because I am a historian and a professional woman and I don't really care about these things. But it just goes to show you how much those kinds of things can take up people's brain space if we allow for marketing to really do its thing psychologically. It just made people absolutely obsessed with wanting to know if something was going on between them and really trying to dig deep into their personal lives and combing all sorts of material online. I feel like it escalated too far when they went to her hometown and they were kind of acting like she was introducing him to family and friends, kind of like they were a couple. Luke Newton publicly met Nicola's mother in Galway at one of the premieres in a way that really felt like a boyfriend was meeting his girlfriend's mother for the first time. It was super emotional. In the eyes of the public, meeting a partner's parents, signals serious commitment, effectively convincing fans that they were witnessing some sort of genuine romance. I remember seeing content from PR specialists who were analyzing what they were doing on the press tour, and by the end of it, they were like, I've got no idea why they are going this far with it unless they're together, because otherwise this would be far too much of an ask from like the studios for them to do all of this. Like, if they're not something, then this crosses a professional line of what you should ask actors to do to promote your projects. And so I think with validation like that, a lot of people just ran with it, even though nothing was really ever explicitly said between the two of them about their relationship. But it had people kind of stalking what we now know was his girlfriend and commenting, vile things about her body or stuff about her personality. It became very intense for some people. I'm going to be honest with you, like it's never that serious and we got our own lives to deal with, but I did love them together. The illusion of Nicola and Luke's showmance shattered immediately after the premiere. And I mean maybe an hour after. Luke was photographed at the after party holding hands with his actual long-term girlfriend. I think it was an after party anyways. I sound like a drama channel right now, but I'm getting to some actual critical points. I feel like almost immediately it turned into hateful comments for Nicola and Luke around duping audiences, selling them a lie. I think people saw both of them as up-and-coming, serious, successful actors that they could relate to, especially a social media audience. Nicola is very internet savvy with a lot of trends. I adore her, by the way, so none of this is direct shade. It's more of just an example of a wider conversation around this whole showmance thing that needs to end. So I think a lot of people felt like they were like a relatable pair that's just like us and not overly media trained and walking polished billboards for the show. And so to find out immediately that it was some way, shape, or form an act really made a pocket of Bridgerton fans distrustful of the show for a bit and not wanting to interact with content in the future. Consequently, the legacy of season 3 shifted from the plot itself to the chaotic nature of the press tour. In my mind, kind of tainting the show's rewatchability for a large portion of the audience. In Nicola and Luke's defense, in this day and age, in this cost of living world where you got to get your coin, they probably consented to this. I don't in any way think these people aren't close friends who care about each other. Of course they are. And maybe everybody was in agreement and we're all good. For certain frothy, lighthearted projects like Bridgerton, that overt flirtation might fit the tone of the press tour. We know Bridgerton is all about romance. That is the main theme. For Wuthering Heights, this move feels completely misplaced, in my opinion. If they're gonna market this as the greatest romance of all time and like a movie you'd go to see a rom-com for Valentine's Day, then I am going to make comparisons to successful rom-coms. When I think of classic rom-coms, like When Harry Met Sally or Pretty Woman, while there was certainly chats about chemistry, the story, directing, and acting did the heavy lifting. We didn't need Billy Crystal, who has a long, publicly known loving marriage, to go on a million press events acting loved up with Meg Ryan to know that that was a great film. That movie succeeded simply because it was well written, well acted, and well produced. Professional actors proved their talent by performing within the film rather than feeling the need to blur lines in reality. Romance already struggles to be taken as seriously as other genres. This whole book talk thing where people only disparage fast fashion romantasy and never any other genre proves the general public does not take romance as seriously as other genres. And when we're talking about classic literary authors, that can be a slog for portraying female authors' stories on screen as well. It happens so much less. I don't know why you wouldn't treat this with a lot more seriousness on the promo trail, like how the recent Hamnet was rolled out. It's clear that Jessie Buckley and Paul Mescal became close during filming, yet their interviews remained richly focused on craft and storytelling. They treated it as a serious film by a serious female director, not a bit of rom-com froth in the marketing. Or I think about the mini interviews with Emma Thompson where she talks about writing the screenplay for Sense and Sensibility and, Ang Lee's directing and the actor's process for bringing Austen's characters to life. I'm not saying that's not also happening with this Wuthering Heights, but because the eroticism is overpowering this marketing, and then the actors are also leaning into that aspect as well, that's what's winning out as the main narrative over Fennell's, creative vision. There's all this marketing around this being the greatest love story of all time, or this is what it feels like to yearn or burn, which feels more akin to what Bridgerton does than like a classic novel adaptation. That strategy fails here because of transparency. We know Margot Robbie is a producer and a savvy businesswoman. We know she's married. Consequently, even lightly implying an affair for ticket sales feels disrespectful to their real-life partners, and it kind of feels like it cheapens the production somehow.
And I was going like that because the rain had started, and of course when you're acting with Jacob, you're like looking up like this all the time.
Exactly.
So I went like that, and he just automatically went to cover my face because he's a gentleman, and it's just like that's second nature to him. He just automatically went like that, and honestly, both Emerald and I just went, okay, stop.
I know.
And he was not aware that he had done anything chivalrous or romantic at all, and we were just like, that was one of the most romantic things I have ever experienced and seen, so do that for the whole scene, and then we made that the scene.
This strategy is unnecessary because nowhere along the way of the 2005 Pride and Prejudice being made did any of this type of foolishness need to happen. Keira Knightley was a young rising star, and Matthew McFadden, who was and is happily married to Keeley Hawes, did not have to do anything where it seemed like publicly they were into each other. Their on-screen chemistry is still talked about today all over social media. People still talk about the hand flex and the rain proposal 20 years later and how romantic it was. I don't think I've ever seen bar one or two behind the scene things of them even in an interview together. And I could care less. It's just about the film that they made together that stands on its own 2 feet. Not to mention, back then, it really felt like these promo tours were not so OTT like they are now. And I know a lot of that is to do with social media, but I really feel like it's unnecessary if the movie is just good enough. The audience believed Darcy and Elizabeth were in love because the acting was exceptional, not because the actors were deliberately alluding to possibly being into each other through strategic PR moves. If the work is good enough, the audience will buy the love story without the PR stunt. And it kind of feels disrespectful and demeaning to the core audience. I'm confused why this adaptation of Wuthering Heights is being marketed as like a girls' night out rom-com where you grab cocktails before the screening.
Am I the only one who feels like this video?
Valentine's Day release, was that kind of the plan from the beginning? Because he's pretty perfect. Yeah, that was the plan. Yeah, I thought this movie would be perfect. I was like, if it was me, I'd want to go with all my girlfriends on a Friday night, and I want to have cocktails, and then maybe dress up a little bit, and then I want to go with my husband or whoever on Valentine's the next night. So yeah, I felt like the perfect weekend for it.
Is kind of giving this video.
It Is With Us is in theaters now, so grab your friends, wear your florals, and head out to see it.
Now I know it's not Wuthering Heights, it's Wuthering Heights. The book. Wuthering Heights.
Which, by the way, they are selling with this cover now.
Is about many things. Those things include race issues, class issues, xenophobia. I understand they went into a little bit of a different direction, making it all 50 Shades of Grey, which looks exciting and interesting. Loved watching the trailer, and I understand how that is fitting for Valentine's Day. But Margot Robbie's answer in this question was still kind of giving, grab your girlfriends, wear your florals, and watch this film about domestic violence.
And I'm not going to get into the It Ends With Us lawsuit that's happening right now because I do not know what's happening with that or the ins and outs of it. So this is completely separate. But there was a lot of backlash with the marketing of It Ends With Us as the like, grab your girls and grab your florals. And a lot of what's happening on this press tour sounds very similar in who it feels like they're, like the demographic that it seems like they're addressing when it's like, oh, this is what we want people to do, like grab your girls and let's go to Wuthering Heights. Because this story has a romance element, the studio seems to think that the actors need to feign a flirtatious relationship rather than standing on their merits as serious performers. Marketing a dark gothic adaptation of a major literary work as a Valentine's Day release for the girlies feels patronizing, as if they assume women won't show up unless they are spoon-fed some sort of book talk fantasy. Clearly, based on so much discourse on TikTok and Instagram, there are so many intelligent, well-thought-out women who know so much about literary tropes and themes and history and Emily Bronte's writing style and Victorian Gothic stories. Why is this being marketed instead to a more general female audience as if this film is a frothy rom-com? Which, absolutely nothing wrong with that. I love frothy rom-coms. But this is Wuthering Heights. There was a quote where Margot Robbie said she wants this to be the next Titanic. And it's like, if that's the case, then it doesn't matter if the public themselves make swirling rumors about like chemistry with actors, etc., like they did with Leo and Kate in Titanic. You treat this as the serious, Oscar-worthy, like hopefully critically acclaimed film that you think it is. If you think this is the next Titanic, act like it's the next Titanic and not It Ends With Us. Say what you will about the mess that can be book talk. What it proves is that women are intellectual. Statistically, we know women are the biggest demographic of readers. They are pushing the sales and publishing and keeping literature alive. So why aren't they the ones who are actually being marketed to? Like, why isn't this film for the intelligent, bookish girls, which has been proven to be a big market, and not this amorphous, like, Hallmark watching crowd that's not really definable and feels like a little bit insulting to pander to? Controversial, but ultimately, audiences are infinitely smarter than they have ever been about film and television. We are no longer living in the 1940s and 50s where our only connection to Hollywood came through carefully curated fan magazines and studio leaks. The average viewer today understands the mechanics of things like PR and film lighting and casting decisions. It is way harder in this day and age of social media to use the same tactics as they used to, especially when it's not long-term moves like, lavender marriages, but literally just like a month or two, like promo tours. Through a lot of social media investigations, we can spot the difference between a genuine connection and a strategy that begins the second a promo tour starts and stops the literal night the promo tour ends. Wuthering Heights reviews have been mixed. I'm not someone who believes this adaptation needs to be strictly historically accurate to be impactful. There will be many viewers who will appreciate Emerald Fennell's unique off-the-wall vision and find it respectful of Bronte's original work, or think that it doesn't really matter one way or another. She's not the first director to make an off-the-wall adaptation, and she won't be the last. The tragedy is that much of the current backlash could have been avoided if the PR strategy had simply treated the project with more seriousness, I think, from the start. Even with some of the outlandish costumes and the set design and everything that people have been annoyed about, I think there is space for adaptations like these, and had the rollout of this been done differently, maybe people would have accepted it differently. We're in a day and age where there will always be people who are obsessed with celebrities' lives. will take things too far and think they are owed people's private lives because they're famous. But there's also a loud group of people who believe we all deserve respect as it comes to our private lives, that needing to fake any sort of romance is outdated or invasive. It's a step too far for the modern workplace. I get it. The film and TV industry is struggling. After COVID and with the cost of living crisis, it's been harder to get people into the theaters. And with streaming taking over and really impacting the industry as a whole, I get why these tactics have been employed. I also feel like I want for there to be ways that things aren't so black and white, that it's not a bad thing that a film premiere is overly feminine or girly or whatever, and it can also be taken seriously. But I don't think it needs to go into fake romance territory in order to sell tickets if it's already really good. My hope is that if we can get back to more original films and television, studios will no longer feel the need to ask their actors to put on a performance off camera as well as on. Well, that is it for me, guys. What do you guys think about a Hollywood showmance? Do you think it's a brilliant bit of marketing? Do you think it's necessary in these days and times when everybody has the attention span of a pea? I think we are all aware of how fleeting love is in the entertainment industry, that, like, why trust it? Number one. And number two, like, we've all got stuff going on in our lives. Like, who cares? What I will say, in this day and age of social media, people are more and more looking for things that at least come off as authentic. And I would much rather two people seem like they actually love their real spouses and partners than pretend for a show or a film. It makes me feel kind of slimy about it for them to pretend. Do you guys remember when the actors used to do those DVD voiceovers where they'd talk over the film, like one or two of them, and that would mostly be what we'd get about the film process? It would be like a commentary thing on the DVD and the special bonus features or whatever. Please bring back those. Like, they were so clever, and like they seemed so low stakes, and like the actors could relax and just talk about the thing that they'd worked on so hard, and like it felt like we were able to watch the film alongside them. I think I'm kind of over them always needing to like try British crisps or like talk about red flags in relationships. Like, just bring back the commentary tracks and call it a day. Okay? Stop holding hands for no reason. I don't need you to hold hands for no reason. Okay. Bye.